Welcome to the Literature Lounge, where writers and authors share their stories behind their stories.
There is one source from where we have come and from where we have to go. According to Vedas, everything, all the atoms of which we are made, any entity is made, every atom has Chaitanya, as you call it, the energy. So it's the same thing. People relate Dharma to religion, which is not what it is. Dharma is actually the right action, So, which also varies depending on the circumstance where we are. So it's extremely subjective.
So, how do you suggest that readers discern the ethical teachings from potential misinterpretations?
Tell me, how is it possible? If you understand the scriptures, then why wouldn't you understand what is ethical and not ethical? So I have never been able to understand when people use scriptures to justify their actions because they obviously haven't understood.
Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Sunita Pant Bansal, a distinguished mythologist, storyteller, and author with a career spanning over 4 decades. Specializing in Indian scriptures, folklore, and mythology, she has written more than 1,000 books. Yes, you heard me right, 1,000 books. We're going to get down to asking Sunita how she manages that. Across various genres, including children's literature, self-help, and philosophy. Her work simplify complex spiritual concepts, making them accessible to modern readers, really the need of the hour. Let's talk today about her latest book, A Comprehensive Guide to Indian Scriptures, that was launched at the Jaipur Literature Festival 2025. It's also a testament to her deep research and storytelling prowess. Passionate about preserving and interpreting India's vast literary heritage, she continues to inspire readers of all ages worldwide. So welcome, Sunita. It's such an honor to have you here with me today. Let's just dive right in, right? Your book, provides an overview of the Hindu sacred texts from the Vedas to the Puranas. What inspired you to undertake such a monumental task? I mean, it's huge. Even the thought of it seems very daunting. What made you take this up?
First of all, thank you, Mohua, for inviting me for your show. And when you say monumental, yes, it sounds monumental, but honestly, when I was doing it, I didn't realize it was as monumental because I started writing way back in 1988, 89, and that was for children, writing for children. And at that time, I was simplifying mythology. So, my entry into mythology was since that time. And since I was writing, obviously, I was reading a lot and I was making notes. Because, when you write mythology for children, you have to simplify it for them to understand. Yes. So the best way is to, when you study for school, so you make notes. And that's what I was doing. So for last over 3 decades, more than 3 decades, I had a huge compilation of notes, books, a huge library. And so this entire process, took more than 30 years. But since I was not doing it deliberately, it was extremely organic. I was really happy doing it. It did not seem monumental to me. But now when people talk to me about this, like you were saying, then I feel that, oh my God, it was monumental. But while I was in it, it didn't seem monumental. So what happened was when my publisher asked me to write a book like this, for me, it was I said, yeah, sure, why not? Because I would have written it. I would have written one book anyway at some point of time. But when he asked, I just had to kind of put together all my notes and my stuff and kind of give a coherence to it and give it a structure, give it a form, which you see as a book. And in any case, my way of explaining mythology is extremely simple. So this book is also as simple as that. It's for lay people, for anyone to understand. Written in very simple language. So that part was easy because I don't talk religion. I just talk philosophy. I talk philosophy of religion. So that part was easy. The only thing was kind of putting it together. So I just sat down and put together the whole thing. And yes, now I look at it and I say, wow, good. Then I pat myself on my back.
You make it sound very easy. I'm sure it isn't, So let's just talk about Hinduism. It's known for its vast array of scriptures, right? In your research, did you find any contradictions, among these texts? And if so, how do you think the readers can reconcile with it, because it is so many things are contradictory in nature. So tell us a little bit about that.
Interestingly, when you say contradictory, I would not use the word contradictory. I would say there are different perspectives, different opinions. And, for instance, I'll explain this to you by giving an example. When I was reading Puranas, now Purans, like 18 Puranas, and when I was working on them, reading them, I realized something very interesting. Like the Puranas, all of them, they talk about how the distant universe, came about, the genealogy of kings, and so on and so forth. But the interesting part of those Puranas was that, uh, any Puran, like for instance, Vishnu Puran or Shiv Puran, they would attribute everything to the name of the god on which the Puran is based. So Vishnu Puran would say the same thing. Vishnu Puran would say everything emanates from Vishnu, and so on and so forth. Shiv Puran would say the same thing for Shiv. Brahma Puran would say the same thing for Brahma, and same thing with Devi. So what happens is, that also makes you realize how democratic this entire Hinduism is, and it also makes you see that there is one source. There's one source from where we have come and from where we have to go. It really doesn't matter the name that we are using for that source. So I would say that, these were not contradictions. They were different perspectives, but the truth was just one. So I would not call them contradictions. But having, studied them, having written about them, and now I don't use the word contradictions. I would just say that there are various perspectives.
So let's just talk a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita. It is often highlighted, for its philosophical depth. And in your opinion, what sets it apart from other Hindu scriptures?
I would say that it is, first of all, well, I can't set it apart because I feel that it's one of the major Hindu scriptures.
Yeah.
But I would also add here that it is the essence of all Hindu scriptures. If you have read and understood Gita, you've understood everything, So it is that essence. So it's the, whatever it is to be a Hindu is what Gita tells you. So it sounds very big, but actually it's very simple, that once you understand Gita, if you thoroughly understand it, you honestly don't even need to read the other scriptures. That is what it actually amounts to. It's the essence. And I would actually go as far as to say that Gita is the essence of all religions. So that is what it is.
It is very deep, no doubt.
It is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
It's the ultimate.
It is the ultimate. The Vedas among the oldest religious texts in existence, right? So how do you address the challenge of interpreting texts that are thousands years old, especially given the modern context of today?
Well, I would say that I took the easy way out. I was not really, interpreting them or translating them myself. I was going through the various translations of people, and that is what is important to even understand any scripture. That you need to read many versions of it, many translations of it. So that is what I did. The challenge was that I had to, see to it that I should not allow the opinions of the interpreter or the translator to color what I was, reading. So that's where my habit of making notes helps. It's like, when you read multiple translations, you find that the truth remains the same. It's their understanding, their interpretation, their perspective that comes through. And so the challenge was to remove that, to cull out the essence and create a kind of a document or a book like this. So that was the only challenge. Of course, people would say reading is also a challenge, reading so many books. But that is not a challenge for me. That's what I love to do.
Upanishads delve into metaphysical concepts, right? So do you think their teachings really align with modern scientific discoveries such as quantum physics? And everybody intellectual is talking about quantum physics. So let's just try and see where the two marry.
First of all, it's not really the Upanishads that deal with science, because as you said that they're more philosophical. But if you come to quantum physics, if you talk about science, Vedas, they are the ones where all the sciences are coming from. So interestingly, it's like, for instance, let's go to the beginning, how the Vedas came about. The Vedas were apparently heard by the sages who were, in a heightened state of meditation. So these were directly given by God or whoever. I mean, you can call whatever superpower it was. It was given by that power to these sages, and through some sounds. And that's how the Vedas came down to us. Now, according to the Vedic theory, it says that knowledge was always present. It was only that it came down to us as Vedas. Likewise, science also says that, uh, gravity is always present, till it was discovered by Newton. So it's, if you see, you can actually explain it in scientific language as well. So when you come to, say, quantum physics, as you mentioned, now, according to Vedas, everything, all the atoms, of which we are made, any entity is made, they call it, every atom has Chaitanya, as you call it, the energy. It's the same thing,
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Sunita,
so
I love that word, Chaitanya.
yeah. So it's the same thing. It's what science would say, every atom has energy, and we don't really get to see it. We get to see it when, for instance, if electricity passes through a wire and lights a bulb, we get to see it. But it's not that electricity is not present. It's right there, isn't it? So these are the things, you can actually very conveniently explain in scientific language. It's a question of language. Like, as I say, the truth remains the same. It's the language that changes every time, isn't it? Yeah. And our understanding somehow gets limited by the language. Even the particle theory, Vedas say that when there was, when this entire creation had dissolved, when there was this pralaya. Now, in that pralaya kal, there was no creation, but there was this energy, which the Vedas call it prakriti. It was there in the form of particles. And those particles, it was like a mist. It was like, you can say, a stagnant sea ocean of energy. At that time, there was no creation, there was no life, there was no death. It was inert. And when the creative cycle began, it suddenly, got energized. And from that prakriti, everything came about. Now, that is, again, everything was given life. So that is the particle theory of physics. So you see, it's just there. The vocabulary changes. That's what all. It's just there. And for instance, Atharvaveda, you won't, you can't imagine how much it talks about physiology, anatomy of humans, of animals. And Ayurveda, we know, is the, the medical science that which has come from our country as part of Atharvaveda. So all the sciences are part of Vedas. So I mean, you can't even say this versus that. It's just one in a different
Amazing,
language.
amazing, Sunita. You just make me want to go back into all of this because the older I'm growing, I'm just realizing that there's so much, in our traditional knowledge and
Yes.
in our books, So let's just talk about the most, popular mythology, which is the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These are epic narratives central to Hindu culture. Now, how do they differ in their portrayal of dharma, which is duty, and righteousness? What is the difference there?
It's a very interesting question and very important too, because dharma is part of Hinduism. Being Hindu means that we should understand what dharma is, and that is again the most misunderstood of terms also. But coming
Why
back
do
to
you say that?
Raman,
Why do you say it's misunderstood, Sunita?
because dharma, people relate dharma to religion, which is not what it is. Dharma is, this dharma is actually the right action, So, which also varies depending on the circumstance where we are. So it's extremely subjective. But people somehow connote dharma with religion and they kind of spoil it all. Let's put it that way. Now, coming back to Ramayana and Mahabharata, Ramayana was simplistic in the sense of portrayal of dharma was done through Ram, the character of Ram, and it was a very kind of a linear story, very simplistic. That okay, this is what he was and how righteous he was and how he performed his duty as a son and so on and so forth. And then, of course, killing of Ravan, so annihilation of evil and so on. It was very simplistic. Coming to Mahabharata, that was complicated because that was situational. Because there, the characters were going through their dilemmas, and that's what and it's more relatable to us because if
Absolutely.
we go through dilemmas all the time in our lives. Everyone goes through. The children, us, everyone. And on a daily basis. So Mahabharata is more relatable, and that talks about what is the right action at what point of time, related to what event. So, for instance, the entire battle of Mahabharata was fought based on dharma, and it's called Dharma Yudh, where the Kauravas felt it was right. Their dharma was, they were doing their dharma because they were defending their land, whereas the Pandavas were doing their dharma. So you see clearly both the sides, the opponents, they are doing their own dharma. So then,
Subjective.
yes, extremely, it's situational,
Yeah.
So this is the difference between Mahabharata and Ramayana. And Mahabharata, of course, that's why it's more relatable, to
Yeah.
us, because we can easily see the various, issues that Arjuna is going through, or Yudhishthira, or anybody for that matter, Draupadi, So that is a difference, and I think that's a big difference.
Wonderful, Sunita. Sunita, in today's digital age, attention spans are really dwindling, and I really feel sorry for myself too, because my work is so on a digital platform. So, how do you make ancient scriptures relevant and engaging for modern readers? Because we have to, like you said, it's situational, and we have to adapt to the changing ways. What can we do?
You see, you can't avoid going digital, I mean, it's like if I say I don't want to go on social media, it'll be silly because, how else will I, relate to other people? So we cannot avoid this. The only way is to use this media. So,
Yeah.
which is what we are doing. But in order to continue writing and to create content, the main thing I find is that, you have to do storytelling, and storytelling always is the most potent way of communication. So
Yes.
when you are telling a story, that's where you grab the attention,
Mm.
And when you make it relatable, then the attention remains, because then the reader feels that, okay, this I can relate to this protagonist. And because what happens is, whether you see movies, even if you look at storybooks or movies or comics or whatever, the ones that stick to us most are the stories that are relatable, where we, feel like the protagonist, when we become the protagonist. And that's the success of that particular story, any medium it may be. And the other thing which I do is I simplify everything, because knowing that the attention span is so limited,
Truly.
I have to be very simple so that I'm able to get through to my reader. Because once I've gotten through, then only I can hold the attention, But in order to get through,
Absolutely.
it has to be as simple as possible. So these are
Agreed.
the things that I do, simplify things, write in the language that the readers, used to reading or speaking or thinking in. That is very important. That we write in the same language that seems extremely easy to understand and easy to speak by the reader. So once I know my audience, my writing is based on my audience, my readers. So that is how it works. It's essentially storytelling and relatability. These
So
two
there are
things.
some critics, that argue that religious scriptures can be used to really justify unethical actions. There are critics who say that. So how do you suggest that readers discern the ethical teachings from potential misinterpretations? You would be the best person to answer that.
But honestly, one thing, there's a question in this question. I'd like to pose a question to you on this. Tell me, how is it possible, if you understand the scriptures, then why wouldn't you understand what is ethical and not ethical? So I have never been able to understand when people use, scriptures to justify their actions, because they obviously haven't understood. The day they understand, they won't be able to justify, So
True.
obviously there is some, gap somewhere in their understanding of scriptures. So that is what I feel.
True.
So whenever,
Absolutely true.
so when I see such a thing, I try to tell them that, listen, have you actually even read it? Do you even understand what you're saying? Because it totally goes against the scripture that you are talking about, all that. So that is what it is.
What do you think about translations? Do you think that they can capture the essence of the original text? Because language does play a very significant and a crucial role in understanding scriptures. What's your opinion on that?
You see, translators do their best, and they obviously would. Now, the trouble is that is also true, that anything which is translated, it loses the essence of the original language. And we see it everywhere. Like, I'm sure even other literature, like, for instance, Rabindranath Tagore's literature is being translated in so many languages.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure what he wrote in Bangla is way superior to what we read in English. Whoever the translator might be, the best of the translators. That is what I feel. So I feel that yes, it does lose a particular level of essence. I will not say all of it, but yes, it does. So what I do is when I read multiple translations, like in the sense that there's so many translations out there. I mean, there's so many Gitas, there's so many Ramayans, there's so many all the scriptures. So I would read multiple. And that's what should be done if you really want to understand a scripture. You should read multiple translations and then form your own opinion. Because by the time you've gone through like 5-6 translations, you would have actually absorbed the scripture and you would have made your own, opinion, your own understanding. And that is what I do. And I recommend also to people that don't go by any one translation, read multiple. If you really want to understand the scriptures. I mean, if you just want to tell people that, okay, I've read this, and then you read one translation, then it could be any, then I don't have any recommendation. But I would recommend that you should read multiple.
So let's just talk a little bit about Jaipur Literature Festival. It's a significant platform for authors, and your book was launched there. So how was the reception? Was there any feedback that really surprised you? Tell me a little bit about that.
You see, the reception was absolutely overwhelming because, I never expected the kind of audience, house full, people standing, and it was really amazing. It was overwhelming, extremely humbling too, and extremely gratifying in the sense that, when an author sees that whatever they've written, the labor they put in, and you see people who are interested in knowing about it, it's extremely gratifying. It's like, you feel somehow that, okay, this is why I was born, wasn't I? It's that kind of a feeling. So it was overwhelming. And the feedback, I would say, there was one very important feedback, which I kind of took away from there, is that there was one person who asked about the difference between Indian scriptures and Hindu scriptures, So that's when I realized that I need to add, Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh scriptures also into this book to actually call it Indian scriptures, because these religions were, they came about from Hinduism.
Yeah.
So to make this book, better, I plan to add these in the next edition. So, that is something which was a very, very important takeaway. And that's why it's important to interact with the readers, with the audiences, because, you get gems like these.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you don't interact, then you might think that what you've done is the best that you could.
Yes.
And, and you kind of, become complacent and you just don't bother. But when you have this kind of a feedback, it makes you think and it makes you feel that, yes, Indian is vast. It's bigger than Hindu.
Oh,
we
yeah,
have these other religions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Agree with you there.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your journey, maybe in brief, you've had an amazing journey, and what got you interested in writing, and that too focusing in, on mythology. Tell me a little bit about you.
Well, my journey definitely has been interesting. My interest as far as writing in mythology or mythology as such came from my paternal grandmother, my dadi, because she used to tell me stories of gods and goddesses and demons and everything. And she would tell them in a way that made them feel like, as though they were part of my extended family. So I was never scared of them. It was always like one big family. And, and everything, she normalized everything, as though, Parvati getting upset with Shivan going to her home was exactly like any wife would do. So it was as normal as that.
Yeah.
So that is how I kind of got the bug of writing the way I write from my dadi. I inherited that. And my family is extremely, my family also is into reading scriptures, So my house is full of books. We have probably most of the books that Gita Press ever published, and a whole lot of stuff from, say, Motilal Banarsi and all these mythological guys and various items and so on. So that is my family background. So it's in my genes, I guess, to be, thinking or writing or talking about scriptures. But why, when you say, why I started writing for children. Now, that has an interesting reason behind it, because when I was growing up, of course, I was reading these books and so on, and I was listening to stories. But, as it was, I mean, being in Delhi, as it was very normal, and I'm sure in other places also, for birthdays, the children would be given fairy tales,
Yeah.
Red Riding. So it was kind of very standard. So fine, as a child, of course, it doesn't register. But when I grew up, got married, had my own daughter, and then I find, well, she was also given the same books, like fairy tales. So that made me think that why are we really bankrupt in terms of telling stories to children? We have stories where we have adventures, we have fantasy, we have this magic. So what's
Completely agree.
wrong? So what's
I
wrong?
agree with you.
And fortunately, I was heading Frank Brothers that time, and I had started this Frank Educational Age where we were developing books for children. So I said, we are not touching Western stories. We are not touching fairy tales. What we are doing is we're talking about Indian stories. And that's how I started writing these stories for children, because I wanted them to read, and they're more familiar with the kind of background that our stories have, because obviously the children have not seen what the other Western classics are talking about or describing, but they certainly are aware of what we have. And I would say, honestly, we have far richer,
Yes, we do. Agree.
resource. We have a
Yeah.
treasure trove of
Yeah.
these stories.
But we also had Amar Chitra Katha,
But they were comics, and they were
Yeah.
comics,
Yeah.
and they were comics. So, and honestly, they were comics and not really available to all the age groups. They were standard
Yeah.
comics.
And they were the
But I,
scientific, yeah.
yeah, so I started writing right from preschool till any age. The
Yeah.
reason was that I have to touch all the age group. There should be no one left saying that we don't have anything. So it's like this. So when I wrote my Ramayana, the first Ramayana I wrote was for 4-year-olds.
Wow.
So and that was a kind of a book which was like a read aloud thing, where the parent is, or the caregiver is going to sit with you and read, and so on and so forth. So I kind of started telling these stories in different forms, the same stories in different forms for different age groups. Amar Chitakatha is standard. That is kind of, and
Yeah.
thank God for Amar Chitakatha, that at
Thank
least
God. Yes.
mythology was not lost. Otherwise,
Yes. I
the kind
agree
of
with you.
the kind of educational system that we've grown up in,
Mhm. I
we would
agree.
have known nothing of our
Absolutely
mythology.
agree with you.
Yeah,
Absolutely agree with you. So,
yeah.
writing for children requires a very delicate balance, between simplicity and depth. And so, how did you approach simplifying the Bhagavad Gita's very, very profound teachings, And in your other book, Gita for Young Minds, while ensuring that its core wisdom wasn't lost while you were simplifying the entire text?
Well, yeah, this is a wonderful question. And thank you very much for asking this, because this is something which people should understand, in the sense that, what kind of effort we need to put to make something as deep as Gita sound very simple. Now, since there are two Gitas I have done, everyday Gita is for adults, 20 plus, I can say. Now, there, for instance, if I'm explaining something, I would explain in the language of the reader. For instance, I'll give you very brief examples, because that's the only way you'll understand. Now, for instance, when I'm trying to say that desires, all our happiness and unhappiness stems from desires, because if the desire is fulfilled, we become happy. If it's not fulfilled, we are unhappy. Now, this is something which a person needs to understand as to how to go about imbibing it, using it in their lives. So I would give an example, like, for instance, if I'm going to the market to buy a pair of shoes. Now, I want to buy a pair of blue shoes. I go to the market and I'm able to find shoes, but not, in blue, the kind of blue I want. Now, that is a desire I'm going to fulfill, right? Desire of buying a pair of blue shoes. Now, I go to the market, I don't get it, then I can get upset. I can get extremely upset, and I would say that, okay, what is this? I'm not finding my size, and I would yell probably at this shopkeeper, whoever. And then I would plan that, okay, I should come next time perhaps. And but otherwise, actually, if you are not upset, if you're not so upset about not getting what you want, you might pause and see that you have two options. Then I would have an option that do I really need the shoes very badly? So can I take them in any other color? Or do I really need only blue colored shoes? So, so if I can buy in any color, I would buy immediately. But if I want those very blue, then I would place the order and tell the guy that please order blue in my size. Now, this is how you filter and this is how you develop. So this is how you evolve your thinking process. So that is how I explain to the adults, why this equanimity is required to in your life so that you make sensible decisions. If you get hassled, if you're quick to react, then you won't be able to make any sensible decisions. Now, coming to children, Gita for Young Minds. There you can't explain like this because the children, first of all, are not going to the market to buy things for themselves.
Correct.
I have to find another way. So what I do is I tell them stories from mythology or folk tales or folklore, whatever. Now, for instance, similarly, I would tell the story. It's a very popular story about this farmer where, and I'm sure you would have heard the story, that how a wild horse enters this farm. And the farmer is sitting and the wild horse comes and he feeds the horse and he looks after it. And the neighbors come running to him and say, oh my God, you're so lucky, you're so fortunate. You got this horse out of the blues. And this guy just shrugs his shoulders and says, I mean, lucky or not, I mean, it's God's will. I don't know if I'm lucky or if I'm unlucky. It's God's will. And that's it. And then, one fine day, this wild horse goes and gets a bunch of more horses. And again, the neighbors come and they say the same thing. And again, the guy says, it's God's will. I mean, I don't know whether it's lucky or unlucky. These kind of things. And then, his son rides one of the horses and he breaks his leg. And these people come and say, oh my God, this is so unlucky. And he says the same thing, lucky or unlucky, it's God's will, I mean, it's nothing. And then what happens is that, the king is recruiting young men for the army. And all the able-bodied young men are recruited. And the farmer's son is not recruited because he has a broken leg. And then the people come and say, oh my God, you're lucky. And he says the same thing. It's nothing, it's not unlucky or lucky. It's just that it's God's will. So this is the kind of, equanimity. This is the kind of balance one has to show to children that, look, this is how it is. I mean, if we can understand that everything that is happening in our lives is the will of God, then we are at peace. Then we don't get agitated very fast. Whether we, kind of, children play.
You spoke to my heart, Sunita. It is the divine that guides us.
Yes. So this is how I would explain the philosophy of Gita to different age groups. It's essentially speaking in their language, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. Yeah. What lessons do you want the readers to take away from your book, A Comprehensive Guide to Indian Scriptures? Please tell us that.
Well, the first thing I would want people to see is how democratic, the sheer democracy in our religion is that in one family, if there are 4 people, each of them can have their own individual gods, the main god. For instance, I could be worshipping Shiva. My husband could be worshipping Krishna. Somebody else could be worshipping Ganesha. They could have their own favorite gods to worship, to follow. At the same time, everybody would celebrate Janmashtami or Diwali or any other festival in the same way. So this is the democracy which is inherent. This is the flexibility inherent in Hinduism. So that is something which people need to understand, That's, I think, probably the main thing, because if we can understand this, that, everyone the source is the same, and we are just using different names according to our likes or convenience or whatever, then probably there won't be any fights. There won't be any fights about that my God is superior to yours and so on. There won't be, because that can be understood only if you can understand what Hinduism stands for. It has no single God. It has no single scripture. It has no single doctrine. How beautiful is that religion,
Absolutely.
It gives you immense freedom. It gives you immense freedom. So that is what I want people to understand, when they read this book, how free we are. If we can, if we call ourselves Hindu, we're actually extremely free.
Yeah, you are very, very free to worship any god you like.
Yes.
Any god that you relate to. I agree with you.
Yes. So that isn't that beautiful? If I could actually if even a couple of readers can possibly read and understand this, and if they are, they'll probably stop fighting, with other people, because then they would understand that the source is one.
The source
And
is one,
the source
absolutely.
is one. So then why? I mean, why all these fights about rituals, about these mundane things which are really petty? The fight about various rituals, those are really mundane, isn't it?
It
Because
is.
uh, you can say that if people are A and their destination is B, there are like a zillion paths from A to B, but they actually make you reach B, isn't it?
So beautiful. There are a
So
million paths to A to
yeah,
B. Absolutely.
so that is something which I'm hoping that people would understand and imbibe.
Thank you so much, Sunita, for being on today's podcast. And for all our listeners, the book is called, once again, A Comprehensive Guide to Indian Scriptures. Please grab a copy. And thank you, Sunita, for taking out the time and being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Mohua. Thank you very much.